everyone. I am Jessie Whittish with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and I am really excited to be with all of you advocates this morning. Also, our special guests, senators who were up until very late last night and are still made time to join us this morning. So thank you, Senator Westerfield.
Excuse me, I got to ask Whitney. Whitney, are you back in Hopkinsville now, or are you still up around Frankfort?
No, I'm here in the beautiful North Christian County, Kentucky.
Oh, well, I'm glad you made it home safely. Did you go home last night?
I did. I was telling the team here before everybody hopped in that I had to take a power nap around E-Town for about an hour, but then I got back on the road. So,
well, I'm glad you made it back safely.
I think
thanks, man.
That's commitment. That's commitment there. All right, so before we hear from Senator Westerfield and Senator Thomas, I am going to kick it to my colleague Mehek to tell us a little bit more about kind of some big themes from the legislative session this year. As a reminder to everyone, before I kick it to Mehek, we would love for you to drop in any questions or comments that you have into the chat. We ask that you stay muted because we do record these, but if you have questions and comments, and if our panelists want to try and answer those, or if others on the call want to answer, or we from KYA can try to answer, but please do drop that in. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mehek.
Thank you, Jessie. Hello, everyone. I'm Mehek Kalra with Kentucky Youth Advocates. I'm our Chief Policy Officer here. And I think Jessie is about to pop a slide in a minute and be my Vanna by going through the slides. So before I begin, I just want to remind everyone that the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children is a nonprofit, or is a coalition of nonprofit, public, and private organizations that stands on 3 pillars: thriving communities launch strong families launch successful kids, and successful kids launch a prosperous future for Kentucky. And as the Commonwealth works to overcome the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and address systematic racism, the Blueprint speaks on a common voice for brighter futures for all kids and their families. So I think we could go ahead and dive into our reflections. So the first reflection that we've noticed is the legislature really has begun to address disparities among children of color. So our kids count data shows us that it's unacceptable trends and disparities impacting Kentucky kids of color, from child poverty rates to access to healthcare to interactions with the child welfare and juvenile justice systems. These trends are nothing new, but the General Assembly did pass several pieces of legislation that begin to address these disparities. One being eliminating the mandatory transfer of youth ages 14 and older to adult courts. And that is actually sponsored by one of our panelists here today, Senator Westerfield. And this piece of legislation is a pragmatic move that really advances the Commonwealth to one step closer to more effective, equitable juvenile justice system. And again, our goal is to ensure that every child deserves a chance to a brighter future, yet we know Black youth continue to be overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. The next piece of legislation that I'll be discussing is supporting the health and well-being of pregnant women who are incarcerated and their babies by ensuring postpartum services and access to substance abuse treatment, as well as other community-based approaches. And that was sponsored by Julie Rocky Adams, and that is Senate Bill 84, which is also dubbed the Dignity 2.0 bill. And so we've had our panelists in the past come in and talk about this. And again, Kentucky has estimated 12% of children who have experienced having a parent incarcerated, which is the 3rd highest in the nation. And then also data tells us the number of women incarcerated has grown at an alarming pace in the Commonwealth. Another justice-related bill, but also tied into racial disparities, is there was a focus on incarcerating those who pose a risk or a threat to public safety by increasing the felony threshold for theft and fraud offenses to 1,000. And that was sponsored by Representative Massey, and that was House Bill 126. And due to the systematic inequities in the criminal justice system, we know again that Black children are disproportionately impacted by having a loved one incarcerated. So moving ahead, additional bills that I'm going to just briefly mention are Senate Bill 77, which is again sponsored by Julie Rocky Adams and Senator Gerald Neal. And this requires a greater minority representation for superintendent screenings. And another one that we're excited about is establishing a commission on race and access to opportunity that's tasked with providing research-driven policy proposals. And that's Senate Bill 10. And Senate Bill 10 is co-sponsored by Senator Givens, as well as our panelists, Senator Whitney Westerfield and Senate President Robert Stivers. One note that I will make is, the key to any commission or work group is its implementation. So this commission has the potential to bring light to education, child welfare, health, economic security, justice, and other disparities through monthly interim hearings, and also promote recommendations that will ensure every child has the opportunity to a brighter future. And we're just very eager to see this rolled out and also hear from the diverse voices as well. And then I'm going to touch on a brief missed opportunity here. As we within the Commonwealth have taken critical steps around justice-related policies that heavily intersect with racial disparities, a missed opportunity this session was around establishing a minimum age of adjudication. So children 12 years and under cannot be charged for an offense. We know the formal court process can be traumatic, negatively impact a child's development, and also creates that maze of problems as well. So we must address that as we move forward. So another theme, a big level theme that we've noticed is a continued commitment to improve child safety and promote healing after maltreatment. So the General Assembly once again demonstrated their commitment to the states, for the state to support really in building a stronger path towards healing, especially those that have been impacted by child abuse and neglect. And so there's several bills this year that have passed, one being sponsored by Representative Beckler, which seeks a stronger accountability for perpetrators of child abuse. And that was House Bill 472. And also tougher penalties for those who exploit children online, which is especially during this time. We know how many kids are spending most of their time online throughout this pandemic. And that was House Bill 254, sponsored by Representative Lewis. And so as I move forward, I just wanted to touch on House Bill 472 because that was a blueprint bill. And it really extends the statute of limitations for misdemeanor sex offenses from 5 years after their 18th birthday to 10 years after their 18th birthday. And this legislation is retroactive. So that means anyone who experienced sexual abuse as a child who missed their current 5-year window for reporting is still eligible if their 10-year window is open. So I just wanted to note that one. Also, going ahead is ensuring continual access to critical healing services by supporting the state's child advocacy centers. This is House Bill 8, and it was sponsored by Representative Duplessis. And again, this just ensures organizations who serve children and adults who have experienced sexual abuse or domestic violence can keep their door open and provide their critical services. And one last piece that I want to mention is ensuring clarity around background checks for those working or volunteering with youth people at youth camps. And that is Senate Bill 66, and it was sponsored by Senator Schickel. And moving forward, there were critical budget pieces as well that were sustained. One was the relative support benefit for kinship care providers who stepped in whenever a child is removed from their home, and additionally the successful HANDS program, I should say, which is the home visiting program. Additionally, within the last night, or I think last week it was, there was additional $20 million that was appropriated in the general fund to support prevention services for families, like those in the Family First Prevention Services Act. So again, we applaud the bipartisan efforts our legislators took, as well as the governor, in ensuring that these bills were signed into law. And though there's plenty to celebrate, I do want to highlight another missed opportunity in this arena, which was increased investment for DCPS social workers. That was not included in the final budget, but it was included in the governor's budget. And again, we all can say this in so many times, that the DCPS workforce is truly on the front line, supporting families and ensuring kids are safe. The next broader theme that we notice is mental health remains at the forefront for many advocates and leaders' minds. So the mental health of Kentucky's youth has been seen as a growing concern for many years to come, especially with the passage of the School Safety and Resiliency Act in 2019. Mental health, we know that throughout this pandemic that, isolation at home, lack of access with ongoing preventive supports and interventions has been critical and really truly missed. So the General Assembly took steps to improve access to services and supports by passing measures such as House Bill 140, sponsored by Representative Deanna Frazier and Representative Mosier, which really sets minimum telehealth standards, which many families and also providers loved. And then as well as ensuring equal treatment for mental health conditions and substance disorders, which is sponsored by Representative Mosier again, and that was House Bill 50. Additionally, the General Assembly delivered for kids and families as they made a $300 million appropriation for the infrastructure of broadband services across the Commonwealth to ensure every child has adequate access to online learning tools and telehealth services. And lastly, established youth age 16 and older who can consent to outpatient mental health counseling. And that was Senate Bill 21 and sponsored by Ralph Alvarado. And though the General Assembly did sustain funds for school-based health and mental health services, there was a missed opportunity to really utilize the increased federal money coming into Kentucky as initial startup or seed investment to hire or contract school-based providers. Especially as students return to in-person learning and there's more social emotional health needs. So the last broad theme, or I shouldn't say the last one, but the last broad theme is really strengthening childcare access to better serve kids, families, and local economies. So the General Assembly addresses gaps in accessible childcare options to best serve kids, families, and local economies by 1, beginning to simplify the planning and zoning process for home-based family childcare. And that is Senate Bill 148, which was sponsored by Danny Carroll. And this is an important step really to strengthen the options for families seeking home-based childcare in their community, especially since half of the communities across the Commonwealth face childcare deserts. So again, this is something that we should applaud. Additionally, there was a $2 per day increase for the Child Care Assistance Program that was included in the final General Assembly budget, which is a critical investment that again allows parents to go back to work, but also access safe quality childcare. And then lastly, the General Assembly last night made a huge impactful investment in early education that really helps our youngest students with a $100 million appropriation to support full day kindergarten. And this is really an example of pragmatic use of federal funds that will demonstrate a very real solution for kids and families. So I just wanted to celebrate that when we talk about childcare and early childhood. So now that I've shared my reflections, we'll have an opportunity to really hear from the champions who made this happen. So today we have Senator Reggie Thomas, a Democrat who represents the 13th district, which is part of Fayette County. He's the minority caucus chair, as well as Senator Whitney Westerfield, who's a Republican who represents the 3rd district, which includes Christian, Logan, and Todd counties. And he is the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Terry.
Hey, Mahek, thank you so much. We always mention, I believe this is our 46th consecutive Wednesday forum. We have had everybody from U.S. senators to congressmen to legislators to grassroots workers on here. And we always appreciate you joining us, whether this is your first time or I always use the phrase, Reggie, you and Whitney will get this. I always talk about those people who have those perfect attendance pins like you get in Sunday school, because some people have been here every week, and we really appreciate that. Before I begin, I would be remiss if I didn't say thanks to my KYA colleagues. We felt like it was important that we started with that very brief overview of what had happened. What that really meant is that those slides got developed after midnight last night, because we didn't know what was happening until it happened. So some folks put in some midnight oil, and
We didn't either.
well, and I was just getting ready to say, you don't bury my lead. I was getting ready to thank Senator Westerfield and Thomas because they didn't finish, and especially Whitney. Reggie has a shorter commute from Lexington and Frankfort than Whitney does. So really important that they're here. You would not be surprised that we did not put the name of every legislator in a hat and just magically drew out Whitney Westerfield and Reggie Thomas. Absolutely, there are not two legislators who I more appreciate than Reggie and Whitney. I was on an interview Monday, and I think Senator Westerfield, I used the phrase that you were the bulldog for kids, because Whitney gets his grip on an issue and he just bulldogs it, whether it's one session or multiple sessions, and that we appreciate. What Senator Thomas does, as well as anybody, is exerts an authentic voice for his views, but he is also so skilled at getting common ground agreement. I love, it wasn't legislation, but he and Senator David Givens, for instance, late last fall, co-championed an issue around kids learning coding skills. Well, that's just such a great approach. And we always talk about holding on to your voice, but finding common ground. Whitney exemplifies persistence. And I think Reggie exemplifies that consensus. And we so value those because Kentucky's kids need both of those attributes. I had a chance on Monday night to be on Kentucky Tonight, which both of you know is both a great opportunity and also, you know, you get a little nervous right before time. And Renee Shaw's opening question was, if we were to write the headline to synthesize this year's session, what would that headline be? Mine was pervasive perplexities, because I talked about just what Mahak featured is, how does the General Assembly do such good work on maltreatment? I mean, 4 profound bills, significant budget commitments, and then it's like, but those social workers, we don't really need anymore. Same thing on the juvenile justice. Heaven knows Senator Westerfield worked really hard to craft important legislation, and yet we continue to be a state that locks up 8-year-olds, where, you know, states like Texas and Alabama, who are not generally accused of being overly left-leaning, they've learned not to do that a long time ago. So mine was pervasive perplexity. Senator Thomas and Senator Westerfield, I'd like to invite you to answer Renee's question. You now have had almost 10 hours and 21 minutes to think about this last session. So you're writing your own newspaper headline. Senator Thomas, what is your headline for the 2021 session?
Well, mine comes right off, right off the tip of my tongue, because obviously I thought a lot about that driving home last night. I would say a step in the right direction. This is my 8th session, and I will tell you, Terry, even though there are obviously some things that I strongly disagree with, the whole approach to take away the governor's executive powers, I think was a step in the wrong direction. But when I look at this session in total, this was my favorite session of the 8 I've been in so far. I think Kentucky took a step in the right direction with regard to this session, and overall, I feel good about where we're going in this decade as a legislature.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to come back to that in just a minute, but I want to hear from Senator Westerfield, his headline.
I'm gonna have to say I really like Reggie's. I'd struggle to come up with something without a little bit more time to brainstorm and think about how I'd do it or how I'd write it. But I think a step in the right direction is pretty apt. As Mehek went through, we had some wins. Frankly, I didn't think we'd get all those that we did get. Obviously, though, there's still some things left behind, and there always are. But lots of positive progress, and sometimes even just a little progress is progress enough. Because there have been other occasions when we haven't had any, or when we've taken steps back. So I think Reggie's description or his headline is pretty apt.
Within that context of a step in the right direction, and this may be redundant, but hopefully it's not. Was there an aha or a surprise moment? So you guys are both very thoughtful. You're very analytical going into sessions, very strategic. When you went in versus how you came out, was there something, Senator Westerfield, that you were like, I just didn't see that coming, either what did happen or what didn't happen?
Yeah, well, I can tell you it happened before session began. What gave me some hope, a great deal of hope, that still gives me hope and excitement, was my caucus, the Senate Republican caucus, having a conversation in our caucus retreat last December about race and the impact of race, the considerations of policy around race. I would never have bet that my caucus would have that conversation. And in fact, it blew a hole in the side of our caucus agenda because we had so much time set aside and we took this much time. But it was a fantastic discussion, and we should have had that conversation a long time ago. We should be further along than we are. But when you are routinely roadblocked on having a conversation about race, and then suddenly you have one, that's a huge step in the right direction. It's just that one step. But I had a lot of hope then, and of course that conversation was aimed towards what eventually became Senate Bill 10. But I think it opened a door there to have more conversations about that. Now, it also highlights, in fairness, it highlights a lot of steps we have left to go, because not everybody understands and appreciates the issue for what it is. And I've shared that with Reggie. But again, that gave me a lot more hope heading into session than I thought I was going to have.
Okay. Senator Thomas, same question. New Year's Eve, you're sitting looking at that session, trying to figure out what to expect, and you're driving back last night as you ruminated, because I know you're a good ruminator. What was the big surprise of either something that happened that excited you, disappointed you, or something that didn't happen that you expected to?
Well, I think and I said this when we passed Senate Bill 4. I think this session, you have to give President Stivers a lot of credit. And history should record him well for this session, because he took the lead on a lot of major issues. He was very involved. We talk about Senate Bill 10. And as you know, Terry, I want to be very honest and transparent with everyone. I did not ultimately vote for Senate Bill 10. I voted for it the first time. I did not vote for it when it came back from the House. I want to be transparent about that. However, I've been in contact with the governor, and when you see what he's written in as part of approving that bill and forming an advisory committee through an executive order, that gives me additional hope for Senate Bill 10. But President Stivers approached me in December and said, I want to do something on no-knock warrants. He said, I want to be very much involved in that. And of course, he was the architect of the no-knock warrant bill that we passed last night. And his leadership in a whole number of issues related to social justice. The teacher education bill between Simmons College and Kentucky State University, the TIF bill, and trying to grow wealth there in the west end of Louisville. I mean, you have to give President Steyer, I mean, he deserves some kind of award from the state NAACP this year, because he did a magnificent job of saying, I want to change the direction of Kentucky on the issue of race relations. And so that's those statements he made to me back in September and in December was saying, we can do something here this session.
Okay.
I'd want to add to that. Reggie's right, but I'd also want to add David Givens to that list. His leadership on Senate Bill 10 in particular, his voice on that issue. They don't listen to me when I bring it up anymore. I'm the Republican that talks about it, and I had spent whatever influence I had and couldn't get it done. There needed to be another member of our caucus that talked about it that you wouldn't have ordinarily expected, or that hadn't been talking about it before. I think Reggie's right about Robert, and I'd absolutely add David Givens to that list.
Thank you all both for those reflections. So I want to talk about, and Senator Thomas already referenced this, there was obviously lots of focus and huge amounts of media attention on that whole notion of balance or locus of power. Folks may remember when they were sophomores in high school and were in civics, branches of government seemed rather abstract. That seemed to be a big theme. I think it's important, and some folks may disagree with this, but it's easy to over-Kentuckyize that issue. I think that what we have seen nationally is whether it is a state like Texas that has Republican governor, Senate, and House, whether it's a state like California where Democrats control all of those leadership positions, whether it is a state like Kentucky where the governor is of a different party than the House and Senate. So this is the whole notion of wrestling around locus of control is frankly not just Andy Beshear, President Stivers, and David Osborne. It's in California with Democrats, it's with Kentucky, or in Texas with Republicans. Can you talk about both the Kentucky issues, but also you all are both linked to national legislative conversations. So again, it's not just state senators and state representatives in Kentucky, but this is percolating from Massachusetts to Mississippi to Montana. So talk about that. And Senator Westerfield, we're especially happy to see that that we have an additional Westerfield joining us. You want to do introductions, and then you can answer the question.
Can you say hi, Hayes?
Hi.
Wave.
We can
He's
end.
watching Daniel.
I think we can end right now. This is probably the highlight of the forum. No offense to you senators, but
I would agree with that.
So what about that, both from your perspective, a Kentucky perspective, but really a national perspective about how we govern? Because that's what's up, is how are states governed across this country? Thoughts?
I think you're right. There are conversations about the limits of executive and legislative power that are being held in general assemblies and state houses around the country. But I don't know that you can make an apples to apples comparison between any of them and Kentucky, because in some states the chief executive office is enormously powerful. In other states, the legislative branch is enormously powerful, and so it's just not a direct comparison that you can make. But I mean, we've gone through an unprecedented time. We haven't had to do anything on this level in 100 years in our country, and even the Spanish flu, or I guess it was 1918. the environment, the economy, the world was quite a bit different back then
Yeah.
than it is now, and smaller than it is now. And so I don't know that you can even make a direct comparison to how we did things then to now in every respect, of course. But if the roles had been reversed and there'd been a Republican governor, members of the Senate that I've talked to and members of the House, I can say it's in both, and I would say in both parties, we've often just speculated what the last year would have been like if Governor Bevin had still been in office versus Governor Beshear. I still think you'd have a debate on the extent of executive power and whether or not there should be limits on it. And I would say, and people, reasonable minds can and do differ on this. I'd say that the statute that gives our chief executive as much executive emergency power as it has probably needed to be limited a little bit. Others wanted to limit it more than me. But this is a legislative process. I frequently tell constituents that email or call, and we share frustrations about some of the ways bills end up being passed. And I remind them I don't get to write it all by myself. If I did, it'd look a lot different.
Be a lot better, right? It'd be a lot better.
I'm glad you said it, but I would have if you didn't.
Senator Thomas, what about that? What was so powerful as a narrative in Frankfurt? I think the Courier Journal's headline today in the print edition is 20 override bills on a veto, whatever. Talk both the Kentucky context, but again, I think it's really important that those folks joining us today understand that Kentucky, as Whitney said, Kentucky's unique, as every state is, but it's also not alone in that battle, that debate between executive versus legislative powers. What's your observation? What's your fear? What's your hope on that?
Well, Terry, I don't know if this answers your question, but this is what I give a lot of thought to. I think you have to always go back to history and who we are. Kentuckians have always been people who like to strike out on their own and have a sense of independence. I mean, we're frontier type people, but also we're generally loyal. We don't like a lot of change. In our early history, don't forget we had a leader in this state who, while a slave owner, really was a progressive thinker. I mean, if you look at Henry Clay, he has to go down against one of the great statesmen of our time. The whole notion of a national highway system, the whole notion of canals and commerce, the whole notion of a Federal Reserve Bank. Those are all Henry Clay's ideas, and we've embraced those today. And Henry Clay was what we would consider, in many respects today, a progressive. He was a Kentuckian. Don't forget, Kentucky was a slave state, but it did not go with the Confederacy. We remained with the Union because we were loyal to the concept of a united nation. As I point out to my colleagues at least 3 different times in floor debates, Kentucky was the very first state, Terry, Southern state, to adopt the Civil Rights Law. We did that in 1966. You have some states today, like Arkansas, that still don't have a Civil Rights Law. So, we're not like Illinois and Massachusetts. We never will be. But we also will never be like Texas or Mississippi either. Okay, we're not in that concept as well. We're an independent state historically. We're a state that is not going to engage in any kind of radical change, but we're going to state that really tries to get it right. And I think Kentucky overall in our 200 plus year history, has gotten it right, and we will always try to get it right. We're not going to do anything radical.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm curious. There's a couple themes, and you guys are doing exactly what we wanted, which is to paint those big pictures. Because again, just looking at the screen, the folks joining us are sort of in the gifted and talented advocate class. Okay, so they know their way around Frankfurt and they know their way around legislation. And what we don't get a chance to do enough is to hear legislative leaders like you all talk big picture and do that kind of analysis. So I want to kind of continue that theme. And, you know, it's easy to, I think it's easy to engage people in the heat of the moment. So an action alert about a particular bill, here's a crisis brewing in Frankfurt on another measure. That's easy to activate. I've heard both of you all, and I want to make sure, this is not the last question, but I want to make sure we get to it before we run short on time. Both of you are very articulate about talking to folks on this screen saying, if you've got ideas, if you've got hopes and concerns, what do folks need to be doing now? My hypothesis is that the 2022 session literally starts being molded today. I think sometimes people
About
wait until
9.5 hours ago.
Okay, so
And Whitney is right about that.
so yes, so somebody has an issue, and man, they want to see it happen. They want to influence the 2022 budget. What should they be doing beginning, not symbolically, but April Fool's Day is tomorrow. What's a great April Fool activity for folks to do with their legislator or with leadership? Senator Thomas, you want to start that conversation?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because during this discussion, there was one forward-thinking idea I wanted to bring to you that I want to get on a table today. And that is, Terry, as you point out, we did a lot of good things. And I really like to hear from Whitney for at least a minute on how hard it was to get that theft threshold raised to $1,000. I'd like to hear his thought, because that was a hard lift.
Yeah.
I mean, I want people to understand that, because the national average, as Whitney will tell you, is 2,500. And we were at 500, and Whitney wanted to go to 2,500, and he barely got to 1,000. But Terry, as again, my Senate colleagues know, and Whitney knows, one of my biggest thrusts is greater youth involvement in voting. You know, I'm a big advocate for that. And I really want to get on the table for 2022. Your group's assistance or thought about, getting 16-year-olds the right to vote, getting 16-year-olds on school boards, or at least electing school boards. Yeah, I think it's time to drill down a little further. And Kentucky's not, and I'm not alone in this thought process. Other states are looking at this too, of getting 16-year-olds more involved in the decision-making process of our government. That's what I wanted to give you all something to think about going forward this year as we head toward 2022. So I'm glad you gave me a chance to get that out.
Okay, and talk just a little bit, Senator Thomas, is whether it's your constituent or somebody on the screen here, what, how, and when should they begin advancing their ideas for 2022, or even giving you feedback on your notion of more authentic youth engagement? How do you go about influencing legislators now for next January?
Get on their schedule, call them. Have meetings with them, Zoom meetings, or however you can meet with them and meet with them in their district. I mean, I think you talk about Whitney being persistent, which he is. Being persistent in scheduling meetings, having conversations, reaching them.
Okay, thanks. So Senator Westerfield, two different prongs. One is talk a little bit about the climate for justice reform, because as Senator Thomas noted, that was not an easy lift. And I know the mandatory transfer that you championed, I know how hard that was to get done. So we want to hear from you on that whole justice arena, but maybe start focus on that engagement question and then pivot to the judicial. So what words of wisdom would you tell folks? They've got an idea, they got an issue, they got a cause. What do they need to be doing today, not in 8 months? Listen
to Reggie's advice. Get on your legislator's schedule, and just. I've said this to these audiences before, Terry. Build a relationship of trust. get to know your legislator if you don't already, or get to know the committee chair that's involved with the issue that's important to you in both chambers, and develop that relationship so that when there's an issue, you're the person that they reach out to, that you're the resource or the subject matter expert that they want to rely on, because you've built that relationship, and it's second nature to them to think, well, how does so-and-so feel about this? Or at least I know how so-and-so feels about it. You can at least, hold them accountable. But Reggie's advice is sound. Bill requests. I've already made a bill request for the 22 session this morning.
Oh, okay.
So that's being done. So I don't wait. And between Zoom, FaceTime, text messages, emails, and calls, there's no excuse for not being able to reach a legislator unless the legislator is just a jerk. And there are some. So I understand if you can't all the time get through to somebody. But you asked also about criminal justice stuff. Reggie's right. I don't know why there's such consternation over raising the felony theft threshold. When there were remarks on the floor, and I said this, I think David Yates, Reggie said this or something similar to this. It's not like we were making it, we were eliminating the criminal offense of theft under 1,000 suddenly, but you would think that's what we were doing. There was so much frustration about it. I said on the floor, and Matt Trebelhorn, the Senate side analyst for the Judiciary Committee, pulled some numbers and ran some numbers and shows that what the theft threshold ought to be at, if we started with the model penal codes level back in the 1960s or 70s and adjusted for inflation today, the theft threshold should be somewhere about $4,500 or $4,600. And we're just moving it to 1,000, and we're still on the bottom end of the country at 1,000. We had tried previously in Senate Bill 120 back in Governor Bevin's first year in office to put it at 2,000, and that was a non-starter. So it's a challenge because there continues to be a belief that being soft on these criminals is not the right answer. But I still have a nugget of hope. There's a colleague of mine in my caucus who doesn't work in criminal justice space very often, but he's a very tough on crime sort of guy. And I sat down with him one day on the floor, and I just said, you want communities to be safe. I do too. You want us to do, if I showed you data that said doing X was effective and doing Y was ineffective, wouldn't you want to do X? Yes. Okay, well, then we agree. We agreed. Let's not just do what feels right or what we think is the toughest thing. Let's actually show if it actually is the toughest thing and it works, great. But if it's the toughest thing, but it works backwards on what we're trying to accomplish, then maybe that's not the right solution, no matter how right it feels. And he agreed with me. So even that stubborn legislator friend of mine still is willing to acknowledge that there's an opportunity for us to find common ground. And I'm thankful that there's at least a little bit of hope. President Stivers and I and Chairman Massey have reached out and been in discussions with, and we've officially announced it. We didn't have any sort of press event or anything that I'm aware of, but Pew Charitable Trust has returned to Kentucky, and they've already started work. We actually expect to have another follow-up meeting now that Sine Die has come and gone very soon. But we're going to work over the course of the 21 interim with an objective of having a legislative package for 22 that addresses the pretrial population in terms of behavioral health and mental health care, substance abuse care, and vocational training and or placement. A process that would involve assessment early on, that would involve, if successful, completion of X, Y, and Z programs or vocational training or whatever, that it may result in an amendment or a reduction in their sentence and the disposition of their case. I'll remind folks that, and this goes directly to the welfare, the mission of the blueprint that KYA supports: thriving communities, build strong families, build successful kids, which is better for everybody. All of this is right up that alley. In the first year or the first week of December of 2019, so right before COVID was on anyone's radar, we had about 7,300 people in pretrial confinement in Kentucky who weren't guilty of anything. They're just sitting pretrial, presumed innocent, who are low-level offenders who had no holds. They weren't facing a charge for something else somewhere else. 7,300 people who aren't at home with their kids, who aren't at work, paying for the things that their kids or their families need, who aren't going to church and aren't going to fill in the blank. And everybody in the room, and at the time it was my co-chairman, my good friend Jason Petrie, and I, we had a number of discussions with a lot of key stakeholders 2 years ago. And everyone in the room agrees that population, the vast majority of them, struggle with behavioral health issues, substance use issues, and vocational issues. And, you know, we said on the floor the other day when we passed a bill of Kim Mosier's, I think 484 or 5, whatever it was, but it was the reentry bill. But the biggest improvement we can do to recidivism is to make sure people who get out of prison have a job. If they're employed, they tend not to break the law again. There's a really, really solid opportunity for us to do something that is transformational and makes an enormous and an immediate impact on the lives of Kentuckians and their families and our communities. So my hope is that we have something put together that's going to accomplish that in 22. It's a big goal, but that work is already underway.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator. And thanks, Senator Thomas, for prompting that question. So let me ask you one quick question, and then I want to give each of you a couple moments to sort of do your benediction. But and you can disagree with this assessment. But when I look at the KID portfolio, it seems as if Whitney has clearly laid out sort of the approach to juvenile and criminal justice reform, which is research-based, incremental, just staying at it, because that's what he's done. I see growing hope that, and this is not new, but it's reflected in this year's action. Child welfare continues to be a common ground arena that invites bipartisanship, big changes, lots of potential. We haven't gotten there. I see my good friend Larry Mihalacek, who has a million ideas on that, but we've made real progress and real change in that arena. The area that just confuses the heck out of me is there does not seem to be any agreement on any area of K-12 education. And I'm just curious from your all's observation, is that ideological? It's political? I mean, there's just, you can't agree on the day of the week, even between chambers, much less between parties. What's the deal there? Can you give me a quick, we're up against a hard close. Yeah.
I think it's political and ideological and philosophical, and also has to do with local politics. We had the 563 that everybody's aware of. Just the part of the bill that there wasn't any debate about, because the tax credit part took all the thunder, was the open borders language, which was based on a bill that I filed, Senate Bill 170. And just getting into the weeds of that, you got each senator and each House member has multiple districts that they represent. Each district is different. You may have a mix of private schools or public county systems and public independent systems. And there are state level philosophical politics, and there's also local level politics when it comes to education. I think that's why finding consensus on education related policy is just a unicorn up there. Yeah. Even Max Wise's bill, the
do-over bill, yeah.
Even that thing, which preserves the option at the local level to do something, generated some conflict among members and people, and it passed, and I think passed pretty healthily. But man, that's an area where building consensus is just incredibly challenging.
Yeah, Reggie, what about it? What is the deal with K-12?
Okay. Well, of course, you know, I sit on the education committee, and I've been very, very vocal about education. You know, I'm not going to get into any kind of big arguments or any battles today. I will just say this: I think it's highly political. I do think, Terry, that we have to understand that what public education needs is equity, not evenness. Public education struggles, Terry, because we do take everyone. Public schools have to take everyone. If you come to the school, they've got to take you. And I know we spend more money on education, Terry, than we do any other line item, but we need to spend more. We need to spend more. And I got to say this, Terry. I got to say this. I stood up on the floor yesterday and applauded the fact that we are putting $140 million toward full day kindergarten.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
need that's step one. But Terry, I know I sound like a broken record here, and I apologize on Wednesday morning of being a broken record. But if we are truly serious, Terry, about trying to use education as a vehicle to better the lives of the people of this state and this nation, and Kentucky is really, more money needs to be invested in education in Kentucky. We need to emphasize education as something that's to be valued in the state. I don't know that we do that, to be honest with you. But Terry, we have got to drill down further and invest in early child education. We have kids, Terry, who come to school at 5 years old who can't read. And Terry, the truth of the matter is we've got 10-year-olds now who still can't read. It's painful to go in these schools, and I'm sure Whitney does what I do. We actually visit the schools, but it's painful to see these fourth graders and fifth graders who can't read. We've got to start early childhood education, Terry, in this state. We just got to do it, okay? And we may not do it for however long I stay in the Senate, but until we get to early child education, Terry, we're really not going to move the needle. I just got to tell you, we're really not going to move the needle in terms of educating our children.
Okay. Listen, I appreciate both of those perspectives. I'm so cynical. I sometimes worry that some of those open district and do-over bills do not have to do with curricular articulation, but where is that really good quarterback down the road potentially going to transfer? Not that high school athletics would ever be a driving force in K-12 debate. So we are coming to the end. I want to say just two things before I let Senators Westerfield and Thomas close. First of all, thanks so much for all of you joining us today. We much appreciate it. A reminder, and I'm sure Courtney will do this, next week we've got one of the leading voices nationally to talk about federal supports and pandemic relief. So I want to make sure you queue up on that. Secondly, I can't reiterate enough my appreciation, Senator Thomas and Senator Westerfield, for you fighting fatigue and slumber today to join us. And so I want to offer sort of a chance for both of you to offer a minute and a half benediction. How you feeling? What's your thoughts? Any final words for this group of children's champions, since you yourselves are children's champions? Senator Thomas, you want to open the closing, and then Whitney, I'm going to give you the final amen moment, okay?
Well, I do want to open the closing, and Whitney's been very complimentary to me this morning, but I want to return those comments as well. There are many Republican colleagues of mine who I have an immense respect for. You know, Mac Wise is on that list. Stivers is on that list. Givens, as Whitney pointed out, is on that list. And Whitney Westerfield is on that list. Whitney knows how much I respect him, because there are times, you know, when we're on the floor, I will come to Whitney and just pick his brain or just call him. And Whitney really is a champion, not just for youth, but champion for the people. So I want to extend my kudos to him, because I just think very, very highly of him as a legislator and as a man, but more importantly, as a husband and a father. Terry, I have told you already, you know, where I want to go in terms of youth. I do want to see youth more engaged in civic engagement. I do want to see early childhood education come to the forefront. I would just say that, you know, whatever your agenda is in 2022, get started on that now. Okay, you're doing that. You're doing that with this 10 a.m. forum, 10 hours after we adjourned. So keep up that hard work. And again, don't stop, don't rest, stay awake, and keep your agenda, going forward.
Okay. Senator Westerfield.
Ditto. Reggie hit the nail on the head, except for the part about complimenting me. The back end of his remarks is the thing I was saying ditto to. He's very kind, and I'm grateful for Reggie's friendship and my professional relationship with him as well. In the Senate, he is a fantastic voice there, and I'm glad that he's there. I don't deserve the thanks, but I appreciate that, Reggie. I would echo everything you had to say. My favorite quote, and I use it often, it may end up being on my headstone: "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men," from Frederick Douglass. Remember that and get to work now, and look at those things that Mehek went through that were missed opportunities, and start there. The minimum age of criminal responsibility, other juvenile justice issues where race and equity continue to persist and be a problem. There are lots of opportunities for good work to be done, and the time to start it for 22 began 10 or 11 hours ago, depending on what time zone you're in.
Yeah. Listen, thanks. Isn't it easy to be cynical about politics in Frankfurt when you see the headlines? And yet I hope today brought to your attention that, wow, we do have legislators who combine heart, head, and soul when it comes to kids. So thank both of you all. Courtney, I believe I'm supposed to kick it to you, and you're gonna do the benedictory benediction.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Terry. And thank you, Senator Westerfield and Senator Thomas, for joining us today and for all of your advocacy on these important issues, especially in the face of adversity. As always, we want to thank Aetna Better Health of Kentucky for their support of today's Advocate Virtual Forum. And as Terry talked about earlier, next week we will be discussing federal and state solutions to end child poverty in Kentucky. We will be joined by Bruce Leslie, who is from First Focus on Children, and he is going to share more about the anti-poverty measures that are included in the American Rescue Plan Act. And again, as always, we will also send everyone a recording of today's forum and a follow-up email, along with any resources that were discussed and a link to sign up for next week's forum as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope you have a great day.